Shalom, good afternoon. How many people struggle with English? Okay, cool. So I was just watching the play and taking it all in. Basically what I want to do after I say a few words is to really open this up like a book group, and I need to hear from you because each of us has our particular perspective, and we need to listen to each other and learn from each other. I'm just one person, and I'll say a few words. I really loved Adam as a longtime teacher and as a longtime principal. I felt like he was smart, he was deeply committed to his students, he was inspirational, and he reminded me of many people in the world's history who said, sometimes I have to stand up for my principles over the regulations that are in existence. I think of many, many people. I think of Antigone, familiar with that Sophocles play where Antigone was told by King Creon that they would not bury her brother, and if she did bury her brother, the king's edict said she would be killed. And Antigone said, there is a higher law than Creon's law. I will bury my brother. And she did, and of course everybody died in that play, but as all Greek tragedies, everybody dies. But she's an early example of someone who says, it is sometimes more important to stand up for what you believe in when what you believe in contradicts what is expected of you. And so I saw Adam as one of those people. There was a regulation that said you're not supposed to express your political views to your kids, but as they said, it was gray. Dr. Martin Luther King was in Birmingham jail when he wrote a very long essay saying that he was willing to go to jail. There was a very, 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 how many are you familiar with Letter from Birmingham Jail? There's one very, very long paragraph where he cites the grievances that he has had in this country that justifies his protest movement and his going to jail. Even though the laws were against him, his principles and his philosophy contradicted those laws, and he said, I have to stand up for who I am. And it goes on and on and on until today. The difference that I felt in this particular situation with Adam was that we are now in the age of the internet. We've been there for a little while, but here's a quick story that I have many stories that this play reminded me of. Here's one. It was back in 1992. There really wasn't much social media back then. I received a phone call from a parent at Brookline High School. And the parent said, I have a huge problem that I need to talk to you about. And that happened almost every day. So I said, okay, what's up? And she described a situation that happened in class that day with a history teacher who was a beloved and incredible history teacher, who was talking in class, and somehow it sort of came out that she was going to have dinner tonight with her partner, and one of the kids said, what do you mean by partner? And it turned out that she was lesbian, and the mother said that her daughter came home and needed to be taken to a mental hospital because the family was deeply Christian family, and this was incredibly disturbing to the child. And she wanted the child removed from the class, and she wanted the teacher fired. And I had to sort of take a deep breath and say, okay, would you like to talk to me in person, come into the office? And she said, no, I want to you have to just respond right now to me by firing that teacher, and of course until you get her out of the school, take my daughter out of the class and give her a new teacher. And so I was faced with one of those, regular dilemmas about protecting everyone's right to be who they are. Sort of the existential essence of humanity. One of the things I always said when I was the principal of Brookline High School was each of us is certainly allowed to define ourselves in any way that we define ourselves, in terms of our religion, culture, spiritual, whatever, and we will protect you under that definition. That's our responsibility. And so the teacher, who again, I knew her very well, I said, well, this is a very diverse institution, organization, and we protect people's right to define themselves as who they are. And yes, this woman is a lesbian and casually came out in class, and I defend her right to do that. And I will not take your daughter out of the class, and I certainly will not be firing the teacher. I will say this to you. I'm going to go down to the class after I hang up the phone and speak with the teacher and find out her perspective on this thing. But my initial reaction to your strong statement is that I will not do what you want me to do right now. So I'll get back to you later in the afternoon. And so that's one of the many stories that I thought about when I was watching Adam, who talked about the possible immorality of the IDF, which is always, when you have an army, and there's always difficult situations when you're fighting an enemy, wars. Some things happen that you would rather not have them happen. It happens all the time in military conflagrations. So, for him to raise that point, to me, was raising an important point. I didn't feel that it was a coercive statement saying that the IDF is an immoral force. What he was saying was that there are times when armies do bad things. Okay, and we can argue in that gray area about the right of teachers to express their particular perspectives, and I think it's important. It's very important to understand that teachers have an important impact on kids. We are important role models for children, and we have to be careful about what we're trying to convince them of. Mainly there's an academic function, and we're teaching subjects, whether it's history or philosophy or Jewish thought or whatever our responsibility is in that classroom. That's our main responsibility. But then we live in the real world, and so my question to you is this: what do you think of Adam as a teacher, as a person, as someone who's not perfect? One of the things I always used to say is that we have to embrace imperfection in our students and in ourselves. I think that's an important fundamental belief that I had, because none of us is perfect, and none of our kids, but kids in particular, are not perfect. That's why they're imperfect, because they're pushing up against us and trying to figure out what to believe. So, what do you think of Adam, and what do you think about what he did, and then what do you think of Sapir? This is one student in the class who, in this internet environment, takes her message virally, and all of a sudden the teacher is in deep trouble. There's a lot of fake news out there, right? Isn't that one of those sicko terms that we have to deal with today? So this play was incredibly relevant to what's going on today about the kind of information that's communicated in various formats. So what do you think of Sapir? She obviously has a very conservative right-wing philosophy, and she was disturbed by Adam's perspective. So,
But if you want to raise your hand, I'll...
Go. Now I'm going to listen.
I would like to see Adam making the statement that he made about what he believed in, and to hear the students reply. That doesn't come through on the play, where he gives an opinion, and now as long as you have a discussion and he shows that the students were actually responding to it, then you would get a better feeling that he did really listen and allowed the student to give their opinion. But you don't get that idea from the play itself.
Yeah, just to clarify, the play actually is not a play. It's a legal protocol. So what happened? What you saw happened in January in 2014 at an old school in Kiryat Tivon. So all we have is just the legal protocol. But thank you. Yeah, the hand raised.
Yeah,
Oh, maybe. Perfect.
the transcript told us, listening to the leader of the hearing, that she was not interested in what his opinion was, the opinion that he supposedly expressed. She said that was not the point. Then what was the point? That is what we were exposed to. Something other than a teacher expressing his opinion and getting into trouble. It's like a whole system or an entire social climate that we were exposed to. And that is, well, another character in the presentation.
He violated the regulation, period. Ministry of Education, he violated that regulation.
But
Done.
he doesn't believe that. He doesn't believe that at all.
Right.
And they're going around in circles.
Right.
And meanwhile, his life is being threatened.
His life is being ruined
Ruined, yeah.
through this, yeah. Again, one of the themes that emerged, again, for me in this thing, is that we have a really hard time listening carefully to each other. You all know about Seeds of Peace? Seeds of Peace brings Palestinian and Israeli kids together, and they do activities, etc. I think our nation, among other things, needs something called Seeds of Harmony, bringing together people of dramatically different political perspectives, and doing common activities and actually trying to converse with each other and have good communication. Maybe we can bring each other a little bit closer to each other, maybe. But right now, we're not going in that direction.
So, what I liked about what we just saw was the fact that it doesn't try to oversimplify anything. And in fact, I like the fact that there are few answers that come out of it. In fact, everything just brings up more questions. And in situations that are this complex, I think we're tempted to look for an answer, and I don't think the answer's out there. I think what is productive is to engage the mind in a discussion about the questions, so then when we have to make difficult choices, we're making them with a greater depth of thought about what we're doing. There is no right answer. I mean, is our morality based on the importance of having rules and having the rule of law and following rules? Yes. Is our morality based on making logical, informed choices? Yes. Is it made upon principles? Yes, it's all of those things, and there are no rights and wrongs. And I think, if anything, we're seeing today is a real temptation to try to look for simple, definitive answers to things that inherently don't have them.
Thank you. Beautifully said. We have time for 2 more comments. I just want to ask if there are any women in the room who have comments. We know we males tend to dominate, so in case there are women in the room who have some comments, just want to give that opportunity. All right, yeah. And then we'll open it. So, John, and then here it is. I think if you might come, it might not be long enough. There we go.
Just barely. I really thought it was an indictment of the Israeli educational system. I mean, it was so horrifying, the incompetence of every one of the officials or educators, administrators, I guess, that it just was, I thought, is it really like that? Because they didn't listen to each other, and they were totally uninformed about the case that they were dealing with, and to go into a hearing that uninformed seemed like they all should have been fired.
Yeah, if you'd like to. Yeah, maybe that way. Then-
That's all right. You're gonna go, no.
If you might come to the mic, that would be of great help. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Working as an administrator in a public school, this happens all the time, and hearings are just a matter of protocol. And it seemed like the end was already in sight before it began. But one interesting commentary is, if you ever look at like Kohlberg's moral development, there's the regulation following the regulations, and then thinking above for the bigger good is a higher moralism. So I think this play is poignant, relevant, and brings out all those complicated questions, because regulations are supposed to be vague, and it ends, like at least federal regulations, let each state interprets their own interpretation of the regulation, and each school has to develop their own interpretation of the regulations, and it gets really confusing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, Bob, the following. Given that 4 of our kids were under, 3 of them actually, were under your leadership at the Brookline High School, we are maybe very lucky in the sense, I don't know if we have the regulation, and if we have it, we don't enforce it. But there was almost no 1 week that our kids came home, and I had some argument with them on political issue, and they say, but the teacher says so and so. Okay, so in this sense, it's all a matter of geography. We are kind of lucky here in Massachusetts. If you take the same 1 year to other places that I worked here in the South, I think response will be very different. I think regulation exists even more, even at Brookline High, but it's not enforced. Let's not accept it, but this is fact. So it tells you more about the Israeli system, that they have some holy cows that you're not allowed to touch, and they don't want the kids to hear about that, and they are very protective. So it's a very difficult kind of I think, issue. But in this sense, we see how lucky we are to be in Boston or Massachusetts.
The foundation of Brookline High School's philosophy was a Hasidic one. It was like, on the one hand, but on the other hand.
Yeah, I just wanted, in terms of you mentioning people not listening to each other, the point that I thought Adam made, and what Saphir did not hear in the classroom and what the administrators did not hear in the hearing, was that he said what he was arguing about, what he was saying was that to label anything as completely moral is a problem. To label the IDF as the most moral armed forces imaginable, it creates a problem of its own, because what happens is that the moral compass gets shut off, and there is no further judgment on it. If you accept the fact and believe and are taught that something is completely moral, then you have no control over it after that. You have no judgment allowed over it. So that's the point that he was making, which is not a political point, it's a very philosophical point, which is what he was trying to say, but nobody heard him.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge, of course, the fact that we are unbelievably lucky to be in Boston, Massachusetts, in our own climate right now. Yes. And I want to thank Dr. Bob for sharing his perspective. And in a time like this, as you've all pointed out, it is extremely difficult to find places where we can listen to one another. So I want to thank all of you for making that type of space, for listening to one another, taking in one another's perspectives. And I love the point that the gentleman made over here, that, why this was so interesting was that it didn't come out to just an outcome or a point. It just brought up a lot of questions. So I thank all of you so much for coming here and exploring life's difficult questions together. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.